2. I'm showing you this one because this is one of the few battles I've been able to play during my exploration of the Skaven against the Lizardmen. I've been wanting to show a Lizardman video, definitely, because I've done the elves, I've looked at them, I've talked about them. I haven't gotten a Skaven mirror match yet, although mirror matches tend to be kind of boring, but I also hadn't really gotten a Lizardmen match. I played one battle against them, which I forgot to record, and ever since then, when people see me choose Skaven, they seem to usually switch to Dark Elves or High Elves, usually Dark Elves, which is funny because I actually think Dark Elves are the easiest matchup for the Skaven. But anyway, I've built this army specifically to go against the Lizardmen, because the Lizardmen are a very different faction from any of the other 4 in how they play. And so, as a consequence, I've brought some Skaven units that we haven't seen before, at least not in my armies. Let's start with the main line. My main infantry line, as usual, contains a bunch of cheap units. It contains a bunch of these Skaven slave spears, which exist only to die. I've brought the slave spears as opposed to the regular slaves, because they do have a little bit of a bonus versus large, so their melee attack will be bumped up a little bit, and their damage will be bumped up a little bit, but mainly because their melee defense is about 4 points higher than the regular sword Skaven slaves, and it helps them last just a tiny, tiny bit longer, which is all I want them to do. I don't need them to get kills, I just need them to live. Interspersed with them, however, are not the Plague Monks that I usually bring. I've left out the Plague Monks entirely. Instead, I have 2 units of Storm Vermin Halberds, which are the elite, well, quote-unquote elite, Skaven spear infantry. So they have, compared to the... I also have some Clan Rats with shields over here. So compared to the Clan Rats, Storm Vermin have just a little bit more HP. You can see their stats here, 7,200 versus 7,320. They have much more leadership, quite a bit more leadership. Their melee attack is very much in the same area. Well, the halberds should really be compared more to the spears. So melee attack, a little bit better, 4 points better. Melee defense, almost the same, only 2 points better. Now speed, they're a little bit slower, but they have higher weapon strength and a much higher damage versus large. So the halberd damage versus large, bonus versus large rather, is 15, and the majority of their damage is armor piercing. So they do 18 armor piercing damage. The bonus versus large increases both normal and AP damage in rough proportion. So that bonus versus large, I think 5 of it will go to regular weapon damage and 10 will go to AP damage. So they'll end up against large creatures with armor piercing 28, which is pretty good. As opposed to the Clan Rat Spears, which only have a 9 bonus versus large, and the proportions are reversed. So they'll get most of that just in regular non-armor piercing weapon damage, which makes Clan Rat Spears much less effective against armored units. So I brought the Storm Vermin Halberds. I have 2 units of them. I also have a unit of Clan Rats with shields, and a unit of Clan Rat Spears with shields in the front. I have 3 Clan Rat Spears with shields in total, 2 guarding the flanks, 1 on the flank of the front line. I've brought, instead of my normal Lord squad of 2 Assassins and a Grey Seer of Ruin, I have brought the Lore of Plague. Now, I have not brought any of the summoning spells, because the summoning spells are still broken. Look at that adorably hideous face of this Plague Priest. I brought a Plague Priest here as one of my heroes on a Plague Furnace. So the Plague Furnace is like the Screaming Bell in that it's a big chariot that a hero rides around on, but it also has a bound spell. It has Pestilent Breath as a mount ability, so you can just shoot out a little damage cone from the mount. You can't aim it the way you do most wind spells, unfortunately. It only shoots straight out from a circle around, so you can just kind of aim it in a direction and it shoots straight out. Limits its usability, but it is still there. I've also brought the Pestilent Breath spell, Bless with Filth, which gives units poison, and Wither, which takes armor off of units. You may notice a theme in this army so far. There's lots and lots of armor piercing and armor reducing abilities. That's because that's very important against the Lizardmen. But so then I have Plague Rash, so whenever he's casting a spell, speed and vigor loss to all my enemies, and Billowing Death. Like the Mortis engine in Warhammer 1, the Plague Furnace constantly strips hit points off of any enemy units around it. So it's very, very cool in that way. On top of that, the Plague Priest is a decent melee combatant. 100 points of armor on the Plague Furnace, very high leadership. Melee attack is both magical and contaminating, like the Plague Priest Censer Bearers. And he has a 20-point bonus versus infantry, and his weapon is armor piercing. So overall, pretty solid, plus 4,400 HP, which is nothing to sneeze at. So I brought him. I have brought 1 assassin, and I've equipped him as I equip all my assassins. I've got the trophy heads, the concealment bombs, and the rival hide talisman for debuffing the enemy front line. I have one battery of warp lightning cannons, and then these two units I have not shown off yet. These are the Poisoned Wind Globadiers. They're a very interesting unit. Small, only 36 models, 2600 HP, so fairly fragile, 100 armor, so they are quite resistant to missile fire. Pretty good leadership, speed, melee attack abysmal, defense low, weapon strength low. You don't want them in melee. The reason why they exist is because of their ranged attack. They have a short range, 85 ranged attack. It's magical. They only have 12 ammunition. It's armor piercing, and they have a bonus versus large of 28, plus their regular 35 damage per 10 seconds. They fire about every 12 seconds, so their actual damage is 40. Add in the bonus versus large, and every one of these little globes that they throw that hits an enemy large unit does more than 60 armor-piercing damage. I believe it's more than 60. Yeah, every globe that hits does over 60 armor-piercing damage. And that's huge. It's very, very important for dealing with heavily armored monsters, of which the lizardmen have many. So I have 2 units of Poison Wind Globadiers. This isn't the whole of my army. This is a big army, but a lot of it is Skaven slaves that didn't cost much. Over in the woods, I have hidden the second part of my strategy that I'm kind of testing out, which is a Rat Ogre Goon Squad. And specifically, this Rat Ogre Goon Squad is led by a Warlord. So instead of a Greyseer, I brought a Warlord, which is the Skaven melee lord. The Warlord is like a smaller Queek, but it's special in that it can ride on a Bonebreaker. A Bonebreaker is a giant Rat Ogre. On the Bonebreaker, it has speed 60, pretty decent melee attack and melee defense, nothing to really write home about in terms of lords, but not bad. High weapon strength, most of which is armor piercing, and a good charge bonus. So on the Bonebreaker, the Warlord is basically the Skaven equivalent of shock cavalry. Not as well armored as a lot of cavalry is, not with as high leadership as most elite units, and not as fast, but lots of armor-piercing damage and a pretty good charge bonus. I've brought him with literally everything a Warlord can have. Deadly Onslaught, which boosts his charge bonus and damage, Verminous Valor, which lets him run away from infantry, World's Edge Armor, which gives him plus 60 armor for a minute. That's a big buff. With that, he has 130 armor. He's very, very tough to take down for non-armor-piercing units. And Rally. He also has the Shield of Distraction, which lowers enemy melee attack by a little bit around him. And then he has Frenzy, which all Rat Ogres have, and all the usual Skaven stuff. He also causes Fear. So these are the standard Rat Ogres, which I have not shown off yet. They're not a perfect unit, but they're not too expensive. Each of these units cost 800. They're a monstrous infantry, but they're the closest Skaven have to cavalry. And they have Frenzy, which helps them because it boosts their melee attack and charge bonus and damage and all that, and makes them immune to psychology until their leadership drops to half. So having leadership around these guys is very important to keep their Frenzy up. Their melee attack and melee defense are nothing to write home about. Their damage is pretty high, and most of it's armor piercing. So they're actually very useful against heavily armored enemy cavalry, for one thing, and they have a good charge bonus. So Rat Ogres, I want to like them. I really, really do. The problem with them is that they're fragile. They have a reasonable pool of hit points, but their armor is only 30. They're big targets. You can't bring these guys against high elves because they will melt in front of archers. Against lizardmen, you can bring them. I'm kind of testing them to see if it's really worth it in multiplayer. But so I've got my Warlord and these 2 Rat Ogres hidden off in the woods, sort of as a cheap shock unit. Like I said, these guys only cost 800. The Warlord, even with literally all of his items, only costs 1500, which is low for a Lord. So this whole squadron is about 3,000, about a quarter of my army. The front line, fairly cheap. The Stormvermin and Halberds are expensive. They're 1,000 each. But the rest of these units are very cheap. The Plague Priest, the Lightning Cannons, and the Poison Wind Globadiers are also quite cheap because they're very single purpose. They can't do anything, basically, except bombard large creatures to death. So my strategy here is I want to kind of hold the line there, snipe out his big monsters with the Poisoned Wind and the Warp Lightning Cannons, and the Plague Priest will rush into the middle, drop breath spells in all directions, debuff enemy armor, and peel hit points off, while the front line basically just has to survive for a while. And if I can hold out long enough, then I'll win because of the Plague Priest. The Assassin is assigned to the Plague Priest as a bodyguard in order to try to keep anybody from sniping him out too quickly, because If I'm not mistaken, yeah, the Plague Priest provides an encouraging aura, so he'll help keep the troops in line. You can see these Skaven Slave Spears have leadership of 56, which is almost respectable, and a lot of it is because they're encouraged by the Plague Priest. That's 8 leadership, it's quite a bit. So that's my army and my strategy. The Lizardman army. Lizardmen are a very interesting faction. I talked about them in the free-for-all because they have a ton of heavily armored monsters. They have tough infantry that's reasonably priced, so these Saurus warriors. And this player in particular has taken 3 Saurus warriors. And you can look at their stats. Their melee stats are not very, very impressive seeming, except their weapon strength is huge. 52 weapon strength. Saurus warriors can crush equivalently priced infantry for that reason. They do so much damage when they hit them. Not too good a charge bonus. Lots of hit points, decent armor, nothing special. They didn't bring any shields, which kind of, as soon as I saw that, I thought, oh, dang. I ought to have brought gutter runners. I ought to have brought my gutter runner kill squad, because they could have racked up so much damage against these Saurus warriors. But hindsight's 20/20. So he's got, oh, I'm sorry, he has 4 Saurus warriors. So they're a pretty good infantry, and as with most Lizardmen units, I should say, their leadership is very high, so they don't break easily. On top of that, they have Primal Instincts. Now, Primal Instincts is kind of a debuff. This is why Saurus are as cheap as they are. Once they've gotten below half hit points, they rampage, which means they go out of control. The player who brought them can't control them anymore. They just go and do whatever they want, which mainly is attacking the closest enemy unit, but sometimes involves just kind of sitting there and meditating on life. I'm not sure if that's a bug or not, or if it's intended behavior of some kind, but sometimes for a while, especially when Rampage has been going for a while, rampaging units would just sort of stand in place and stare at the sunset and think about things and ponder, whether they really ought to be fighting like this, man, And then they'll snap out of it and go kill something again, but for a minute it's very, very frustrating, actually. So behind the Saurus, he has a unit of Skink Cohort. Skinks are the first tier Lizardman infantry. They're not very good, but they're there. They have shields, they're relatively fast, and they're cheap. I think Skink cohorts cost 300. He's chevroned them up a little bit, so they're actually respectable. They'll certainly do a decent job against my clan rats. And he's hidden a Skink Priest with the Lore of Beasts in with the Skink cohort. So the Skink Priest, very, very fragile. It's a spellcaster. He's brought it very cheap. The only thing he's got on his... Oh, sorry, where'd it go? It disappeared on me. The only thing he's brought on the Skink Priest is... No, come on. He's brought the Wild Heart, which is it's basically a mini arcane conduit when you cast a spell. He's got Cold-Blooded, which is that heal that all Lizardman special characters have. We talked about that in the free-for-all. And then he has Flock of Doom, which is an area of effect damage spell. It's not nearly as good as it used to be, but it does still cause some damage. It can take hit points off of enemy units. It's useful. And the Skink Priest built like this, with only Flock of Doom, is like, I don't remember, 400, 500, something like that. Very, very cheap. So you can afford to bring this guy and not really care about it. So he can just do some damage. He'll make his points back, no problem. Then, the main heart of his army is, of course, the dinosaurs. He has a Saurus Old Blood for his lord on a Carnosaur. So, very tough, very heavily armored, high leadership, high stats, anti-large. So this is a monster hunting monster, and a high charge bonus. It also causes terror, which makes it very, very dangerous against the Skaven, in particular with their low leadership. He has the Horn of Kygor, which is an area of effect melee attack and charge bonus buff. That's very powerful. Stand your ground. The Amulet of Itzel, which gives the unit itself 2/3 damage resistance for 21 seconds. So you can basically pop that and use it to pull out of a bad situation. He has Foe Seeker, he has Cold-Blooded, and Frenzy because he's on a Feral Carnosaur. Now, Feral Carnosaurs do rampage, but Saurus Old Bloods do not. Saurus Scar Veterans, on the other hand, the hero version, do. The Saurus Scar Veteran is basically... The Saurus Scar Veteran is basically... No, the Saurus Scar Veteran is basically just a smaller Old Blood. It's a little bit worse in every way. It's also a little bit cheaper. And, well, it actually has a slightly higher charge bonus, which is interesting. And so the Scar Veteran has Deadly Onslaught, the Plaque of Dominion, which lowers leadership, again, really useful against Skaven, and then all the standard Lizardman things, including Primal Instincts. So this unit will rampage. The Lord won't, but the hero will. Both of these are very high damage, terror-causing monsters. Basically, their role, in combination with the Feral Bastiladon, which we also talked about in the free-for-all, very heavily armored infantry mulching unit, So these two are specialized versus large units. This one is specialized versus infantry. All three have the same role, which is to rush forward, smash through the line, get at my valuable units, eat them, cause terror, make me run away. Over here, he has 2 units of chameleon skinks, and chameleon skinks are basically lizardman gutter runners. They're a little bit different. They're worse in melee because their melee attack is lower, and they're better at range. They have slightly longer range, more ammunition, and about the same damage. But they cost less. They have fewer models as well, and less hit points, so they're more fragile. However, they have 40% missile resistance instead of 30% physical resistance. So against melee attacks, they have no protection. Against missiles, they actually have more protection than the gutter runners. So chameleon skinks are sort of a more specialized, ranged version of the poison gutter runners. They're more fragile, they're the same speed, they're less good in melee, and they have fewer models, so they shoot a little bit less, but they can apply poison and a little bit of grinding away damage without much fear of being caught, like the gutter runners can. The only difference is that these guys cannot effectively charge into melee, and they cost about 2/3 of what gutter runners with poison do. So I would say they're actually more efficient in their chosen role, because they have less of a hybrid use. So those are invisible to me, because they have that same stock ability that gutter runners do. And then over in the trees, he has 1 unit of Cold One Spear Riders, which are anti-large cavalry with armor piercing. So from looking at the Lizardman army, so as I said, my strategy, play very defensively, get my infantry line involved to hold with the Plague Priest backing them up, snipe out the monsters. His strategy is to rush, because Lizardmen always rush, but he's brought a whole lot of anti-large. He's got the Cold One Spear Riders, he's got 2 Carnosaurs. It's interesting, it's almost as if he was expecting me to go Monster Mash. Because, you know, Skaven can go Monster Mash. I could bring 3 or 4 or 5, probably, Rat Ogres, a couple of Doom Wheels, maybe a Hell Pit. Excuse me, sorry. Allergies getting at me. I could go Monster Mash. I could bring a whole bunch of large creatures, and if I did, these Carnosaurs would be worth their weight in gold. But I didn't. I brought mainly infantry, so it's interesting. He did also bring this Bastillodon with the solar engine. So this is a fascinating unit because it's basically a feral Bastillodon, except it doesn't rampage and it has a giant laser on the back. 18 damage, flaming and magical. It applies this debuff to units that it hits. They're blinded for 10 seconds, which lowers their melee attack, their missile accuracy, and their defense. And it just does huge damage. It's not much armor piercing. It's mainly regular damage as opposed to AP, but still, it's a lot of damage. Also, these skinks hanging off it, I believe they throw javelins, which is kind of a little secondary missile attack that does a little bit of chip damage to infantry close to it. But mainly, it's an artillery piece that can also take care of itself in melee just as well as a feral Bastillodon can. And, like I said, with the added bonus that it doesn't rampage. So, can't really go wrong with the Laser Lizard. So anyway, that's enough talking. So he's going to rush towards me. I'm going to kind of hold back and see what he does while sniping with the Warp Lightning Cannon. So let's see how it goes. So I can't see the Cold One Riders. I can't see the Chameleon Skinks. He can't see my Rat Ogre squad. Back there, I think my Warp Lightning Cannon is, yep, firing. So it's coming into the Saurus Warriors. Killed a couple. I'm going to shift its target to... Which one did I shoot? I think I started shooting at the Saurus Old Blood almost immediately, because that seems to me to be the biggest threat. Or was it the Scar Veteran? Nope, it's the Scar Veteran. So you can see the Warp Lightning Cannon peels off pretty good chunks of damage with every shot. So now he's rushing his Carnosaurs forward, I think in a bid to get through my lines and stop the lightning fire before it starts coming. This is the point where I notice his Chameleon Skinks, because they're getting close enough to see. I launched my Rat Ogres forward in an effort to catch the Chameleon Skinks. Unfortunately, they're skirmishing, and they do the thing to me that I do to other people with Gutter Runners, which is they start shooting poison darts at me, slow my units down so I can't catch them. The Saurus Scar Veteran is getting way too far ahead. Kind of thought better of it, changed its target, but he's still coming in. I'm pulling up these Clamrat Spears around here to kind of zone these Chameleon Skinks out. The Laser Lizard opens fire with a miss. I see the Cold Ones at about this point, but I'm not too worried about them because I do have all these spears over here. Now, he's dropping a Flock of Doom, an upgraded Flock of Doom on me. Now this strategically speaking, this was a mistake. He should have at this point noticed the Poisoned Wind Globadiers. This is a lot of anti-large firepower right here, and he's sending his 2 large units way ahead of the rest of his army. Yes, he's popped a couple of his buffs, but still, they're going to take a lot of damage because they're not directly supported. I'm pulling my Rat Ogres back because they don't need to be going after the Chameleon Skinks. I've seen that his line is very short compared to mine, so I'm sending this flanking unit to chase these Chameleon Skinks, because now I feel like I know where all of his army is. With all of this, and the Coldblood Spear Riders, and the 2 dinosaurs, he can't have any points in reserve at this point. So, a good shot from the Laser Lizard took out one of my lightning cannons. The Storm Vermin Halberds get on the Scar Veteran. Here's the Saurus Old Blood. The first volley from the Poison Wind Globadiers completely missed, which I was very disappointed to see. But here comes the Laser Lizard again. He actually, I think, shot his own lord. The Poison Wind Globadiers get a second volley. That one did a little bit of damage. He's down to 5770 HP with 1 volley. The Coldblood Spear Riders over here are getting charged by some Clanrat Spears. My Plague Monk up in the front line took a shot, but hit those Saurus Warriors with a Pestilent Breath. He's hitting those ones with another because he has that both as a spell and an ability. The Feral Bastillodon is getting swarmed by spears and halberds over there. Not going to do too terribly well. My Poison Wind Globadiers are just sitting, and look at that. That Scar Veteran is gone already. The Storm Vermin Halberds did some damage, but that was mainly a point-blank volley from the Poison Wind Globadiers. Each of these guys, just take a look at them. It's about, for every shot against large units, it's about, I think it's 64 armor-piercing damage, or it's about 60, because some of it goes to regular missile damage. 60 armor-piercing damage times 36. Each of these units can, in an ideal world, do almost 2,000 damage with 1 volley, and that's pretty much what they did. I think they did about 2,000 damage, the 2 of them, or 2,500 in a single volley, and the Scar Veteran just broke. So the Scar Veteran is already running, being pursued. The Clanrat Spears are coming up. My Rat Ogre Squadron is coming in to try and stop the Saurus Old Blood. I didn't see these Saurus Warriors coming in until it was almost too late. The Poison Wind Globadiers are starting to pull away. Over here, this fight is kind of going well. Everybody's doing what they're supposed to do. The Coldblood Spear Riders have gotten in here surrounded by spears and are being massacred. I've dropped a Wither to lower everybody's armor, which makes them much more vulnerable. And my Skaven Slaves are running, but my Clanrat Spears are holding firm. My Storm Vermin Halberds are kind of getting wrecked because they're surrounded, but they're doing their job. The Saurus Scar Veteran is coming back. The Old Blood had to pull out because it was just taking too much damage. Has charged in here after the Plague Priest. That was probably a mistake. I've dropped Bless with Filth on all these units, so they're all doing poison. The Rat Ogres are coming in behind, smacking these Saurus Warriors around, doing a little bit of damage. I've got my Assassin in there as well, guarding the Plague Priest. Back here, the Saurus Scar Veteran is about to die from another volley from those Poison Wind Globadiers. My other unit over here has gotten caught by a flanking unit of Saurus Warriors, and it is in the process of getting beaten the hell up. But still doing fine. Over here, one unit of Clanrat Spears is gamely holding off half the Lizardman army. Some routing Skaven Slaves and Clanrats are coming back to the battle over there. The Laser Lizard is still in good shape, because I haven't really targeted it, but it also hasn't done much damage. Here my Rat Ogres getting into this Skink Priest, who is also surrounded by Storm Vermin, so the Skink Priest is getting beaten up as well. This wrapped up very satisfactorily. These Saurus routed, these Saurus things kind of moved around. These two Saurus and Skinks are coming in to attack the Storm Vermin, which is a fight they'll probably win, but it won't be terribly good for them. My Warp Lightning Cannon has come back, only has 1 cannon left, but that's okay, and the enemy Old Blood is almost destroyed. I'm pulling these Poisoned Wind Globadiers back. These Saurus should swing to attack them, but I think he was too busy trying to micro this fight and didn't notice when the Poison Wind Globadiers lined up for that volley. Took about 100 hit points off the Saurus Old Blood because it had gone back after the cannons, but now it's being sandwiched between halberds and Clanrats, and there is no part of that. It doesn't want any part of that. A few more Poison Wind shots, and the Saurus Old Blood is broken as even more spears keep coming back in. Plague Priest is causing a little bit of damage to those Saurus Warriors to keep them at bay. These Storm Vermin Halberds have been flanked. My Rat Ogres are losing. See, this is the thing. If Rat Ogres don't get a great charge, they're in trouble because they're just too fragile. They get beaten up by pretty much anything. These Saurus warriors, despite the fact that they look amazing, and I really wish they actually fought as well as they look. Look at that belly flop. Rat ogres really aren't that good, which is sad. Over here, these units were chasing the chameleon skinks. They've routed. That's fine. They're just clan rats and Skaven slaves, and they kept the chameleon skinks away for a crucial little time, while my rat ogres and warlord mobbed the Bastillodon. The warlord's been popping buffs as he goes along. See, he's had the World's Edge armor up there, so he's at 140 armor, which helps. The Bastillodon has been trying to shoot him, but doesn't really have the damage to get the job done. Plague Priest is coming up, pulling some hit points off the skink cohorts. These Saurus warriors are being defeated just because they are outnumbered so very badly. The Warp Lightning Cannon is entirely useless at this point, so I've just thrown them in. These units just finished escorting the enemy lord off the field and are now returning with the assassin at their head, Skaven slave spears, and clan rats. These Poison Wing Globadiers don't have any more large targets left back here, so they're just throwing at the Saurus warriors because they might as well. They still do a whole bunch of armor-piercing damage even without that bonus versus large. Of course, I have some routing units, but it doesn't really matter. Over here, these rat ogres have come back from routing. Lots of something or other happening. And the enemy army shatters. So, that was an interesting one. It was fairly frenetic. I feel like the anti-large units that I brought did their jobs. So if we look at the kill numbers, they're not high, and partially that's because he brought quite a small army, only 600 units total. But the other part of it is, I was very intensely focused on taking out some very small units. The infantry didn't really concern me. The chameleon skinks, I literally never touched the chameleon skinks. I never engaged in combat with them. They just shot the whole battle, and they got okay kills, but nothing spectacular because they just don't do much damage. And I feel like that's how you kind of have to deal with chameleon skinks and similar units as Skaven. You can't reach them, ignore them. So looking at the various armies, I lost twice as much as he did. It didn't matter because I brought more than twice as much. My warlord, 1 kill. That's okay. The contribution of the warlord and the rat ogres to this battle was mainly mobbing a couple of key single model units, like the Old Blood and the Bastillodon with the solar engine. The Plague Priest, 22 kills, respectable. The mechanisms by which the Plague Priest does damage do not lend themselves well to large kill numbers. He tends to do some damage to a lot of models rather than a lot of damage to a few models. So that's fine, especially because he dropped Wither in that one fight. He was constantly roaming around pulling HP off of models to make them easier to kill with my other units. He did his job. The Assassin, likewise. The Assassin got a few good hits against the Scar Veteran, dropped his debuffs, did his job. Skaven Slave Spears, we've talked about them. We don't need to talk about them. The Clan Rat Spears with shields did a very good job. These guys were instrumental in sandwiching the Cold One Spear Riders and preventing them from doing much damage, and in bulking out the front line to stand up against the Saurus for long enough for my special units to do their work. Storm Vermin Halberds, likewise, quite pleased. They didn't get a whole lot of kills, but they lived against the charge of those monsters, and in particular, they didn't rout. Or I think one of them routed briefly, but came back almost immediately. That's what I brought them for. Also, one of these units was key in taking out the Feral Bastillodon, which routed fairly early in the battle. The Poison Wing Globadiers, very successful as well. Once again, almost no kills, but that's because they were throwing at monsters. So the Saurus Old Blood technically did not die, he routed off the map. The Saurus Scar Veteran did die, that might be one of those kills, I'm not entirely certain. Even these two units didn't technically die, they just routed, but because they're units with such small model numbers, doing a whole bunch of damage is just as good as killing them. The Rat Ogres did well in conjunction with the Warlord. I'm not sure they would have done well if they had been a little more aggressively countered. Really, I shouldn't have pulled them out. When I saw the Chameleon Skinks, I should not have attacked with the Rat Ogres. I should have kept them hidden and come into the rear of the enemy army. I could have done that better. The Warp Lightning Cannon did some damage. It didn't get a whole lot of kills. Once again, it was shooting mainly at monsters, and it pulled some HP off. I don't think it did enough damage to justify a 1,000 gold price tag. Tactically speaking, though, I think it's valuable to have at least one piece of artillery as the Skaven, because it compels the enemy to come to you. It makes the fight happen on your terms, and that's kind of what I needed. I didn't need these chameleon skinks skirmishing me to death at will. I didn't need the lizard man to be standing back and dropping lots and lots of Flock of Doom on me. I needed him to come in and fight. And I feel like the lightning cannon accomplished that. The lightning cannon made them come in and fight me in the way that I wanted them to fight me. So overall, yeah, I think I'll keep bringing the lightning cannon. And, you know, it did get a chevron. Didn't it? No, that's not a chevron. Never mind me. Ignore me. The Stormvermin Halberds got chevrons, though, so they must have killed something important. On his side, the Saurus are always a good idea against the Skaven. They can do very, very well in the right circumstances. I mean, look at this unit. 105 kills, almost no damage. Admittedly, probably slaves, but eh. Chameleon Skinks, likewise pretty good, mainly because they apply that poison debuff, and it makes the enemy units that they're shooting at much, much worse in combat. The Cold One Spear Riders could be a good idea, especially because I did have a whole bunch of lightly armored large units on the field that they could have gone after. But they're slow, and if they get caught in the wrong place, they get killed by infantry really, really easily. So in this case, didn't work out. Still probably a good pick. The Saurus Old Blood and the Saurus Scar Veteran are always worthwhile, but you can't just throw them out ahead of the army like that, especially not against Skaven, who can have these Poison Wind Globadiers and the Lightning Cannons and the Halberds and all of that. I basically got to tear these two units apart for free because they were ahead of the army, and they weren't. If they had sent in the Saurus first, and then brought the Old Blood and the Scar Veteran through the lines or around the side, I would have had much more trouble dealing with them. I probably would have had to pull my Warlord and Rat Ogres out and try to use them as a blocking force, which would have ended very badly because both of these units are anti-large and have a big anti-large bonus. So, overall, though, good game. When my front line started to come apart, I nearly lost it there for a minute. Thanks to my opponent, Ryan1307. Love to see you again in the ladder, fight a couple more battles with you. I liked the build. I think the Chameleon Skinks were a great idea. The Saurus line is a good idea. The Skink Priest was also good, just because it can do damage with almost no threat of retaliation, and you didn't have any other magic, so something to use those wins up is an excellent idea. The Laser Lizard, against Skaven, maybe not. It didn't do a whole lot. It was mainly shooting at the Plague Priest the whole match, and even so, with that and the Carnosaurs coming after it, the Plague Priest was still only at half health, so probably didn't pay off. But good game to my opponent. Thank you all so much for watching. If you liked this video, more like this will be coming on the regular. Probably going to wrap up the Skaven focus in the next couple of days and move on to one of the other races. I may try Lizardmen next, because the Lizardmen are kind of an interesting tactical problem, given the limited tools that they have to work with. But thank you so much for watching. Feel free to subscribe to the channel if you want to see the next several videos, and I'll see you in the next one.